So welcome everybody to Salesforce DevOps Wrapped 2024. The aim of today is to take a look back at the year that we've come. January seems like an awfully long time ago, and a lot of amazing things have happened throughout the year. We're drowning in AgentForce content, so which we will talk about a little bit later in this webinar. But lots of things have started to happen and continue to happen as it pertains to DevOps in the Salesforce ecosystem this year. So I brought a great panel together to discuss some of those things that have been happening. Let's go around the room and introduce everyone. So first and foremost, I'm joined by Rob Cal. Rob, say hello to everybody, please.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
Rob is joining me as one of my colleagues from Gearset. The other of the two DevOps advocates here at Gearset brings a lot of knowledge to the table. Salesforce developer by background before joining us a couple of years ago. If you are not familiar with Rob, you will see him on various places, social media networks, sharing his DevOps quick bites and a lot of his content and knowledge across the Salesforce ecosystem. We are joined by Blanca Leon Carter. Hi, Blanca.
Hi, Jack, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. It's always a great time to talk about something that is a passion area of mine, and I have a lot of professional experience in, so I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And thank you for joining us. Blanca is a alumni member of the Gearset DevOps Leaders Program and a Capado champion, as well as a DevOps connoisseur. Lots of content from Blanca online about that. I'm really passionate in the industry, so it's a pleasure to have you. And finally, last but not least, Jeb Garrett. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Welcome from sunny Orlando, where it is currently 59 degrees. So I feel bad for people that are in Chicago and Michigan. But, down here in Florida, it's very nice today.
We have sun, but it is not that warm here. So I am envious, Jeff.
Oh dear. Jeb, thank you for joining us. Jeb, also a member of the alumni cohort of Gearset DevOps Leaders and has a ton of experience bringing great DevOps to the teams that he's worked in. So really grateful to the three of you for joining me on this webinar and talking about 2024 and some of the amazing things that have happened. So number of things to talk about throughout the year. But one place that I wanted to start with in this conversation was about tooling specifically and Salesforce tooling itself. So one of the things that happened this year is Salesforce retired the AMP migration tool. And Blanca, you actually said something really interesting in the pre-call to this. So not only does the retiring of AMP show the development and the change in which ways people are adopting newer technologies or differing ways of things, but the retiring of the old tool, we're also seeing that as a requirement in job specs still. Being on the job market yourself, you're still seeing it coming up. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought of it as a huge opportunity for us to get the word out more stronger as DevOps advocates and really just get everyone to understand what does DevOps look like in the Salesforce ecosystem today, right? I think that when you see older tools that are being decommissioned and when we think of older pipelines that maybe take one highly skilled person who's working in a cube somewhere to manage it, and that's not true of how our teams look like, right, at these companies. And as a consultant, we've seen a variety of sizes and teams and different levels of skill sets and expertise, but it's concerning to definitely see it still as a requirement on job descriptions when obviously the job description is out to date already. So we need to get everyone on board with understanding these trends. And so I was really excited about this event because it is a crucial point, right? You want to make sure you hire on for the good skill sets and make sure that you're staying abreast of the best practices and the tooling that are there currently that your teams can leverage. And so I'm here to help make sure we can amplify that need in our broader ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. And Rob, you actually wrote a blog post about this for Gearset when they retired the AMP migration tool. What are your kind of thoughts about how the retiring of such a tool is taking us forward into a new era?
It's an interesting one, and I back in the day I was in the trenches using AMP for the deployments, before sort of the market had moved on a bit. I think that there is another sort of interesting perspective on it being in a job spec, though, in that, if you find someone that's still doing DevOps today that knows Ant, chances are they've been doing DevOps a while. I mean, obviously, it's one facet. It's the deployment facet of DevOps, but it does tend to sort of implicitly suggest that there might be quite a deal of experience there. And I think, the longer the time elapses since it's been retired, and people are still listing it, then maybe that's an indicator of I've been at this DevOps game a little while. So every cloud has a silver lining. But yeah, I think it's probably the right move from Salesforce on a couple of fronts. One is it's technical debt effectively. It's somebody else's project, and in its own form, and then obviously they have to constantly update it and maintain it to make it work with Salesforce, with the overlays and the scripts that make it a Salesforce specific tool. But also, from a very sort of strategic and commercial thing, Salesforce have entered the chat, as they say. We've got DevOps Center now, so I think there's potentially a bit of sort of strategic thinking behind that, as well as the practical sense as well.
Yeah, Jeb, what are your thoughts on that? Rob's mentioned DevOps Center there. Where do you think we might be going, or the wider ecosystem might be going, with the adoption of new tools and technologies? I mean, to even talk about change sets seems almost antiquated these days, especially with DevOps in the fold. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same with anything else, right? Things change over time, new technologies come out, new ways of thinking. I think this is just another iteration of that. Seeing Ant in, job postings, to me, to the point, it is a little antiquated. So it lets you kind of think, what's the purpose of that? Is it just kind of like a situation of, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it? And that's like the mentality that these people are going with? Or is it something like, hey, we want someone who's experienced in Ant maybe to take that next step and have more knowledge into moving to better solutions? But, bringing up DevOps Center and the way that that's going, I mean, it really seems very similar to, I would say, what I've seen in my journey over the last 5 years working with Gearset. In that, there's a lot of things. I just hopped on the kind of the roadmap that they had the other day on the dev side for DevOps Center, and they talk about a lot of things that, we've seen in Gearset over the years, Jira integration, GitHub Enterprise, their data cloud, pre and post deployment steps, which is actually one of the components that our release manager was recently kind of testing out and moving into our org as far as a pilot program. And I think we're going to continue seeing this integrations with other third parties. As time goes on, things change, new tools come out, people see value in different pieces, and how those, kind of go together. And I think that's the big thing with DevOps Center, right? Like, it's getting everyone exposed to Git, and a lot of people, like you were saying, in change sets didn't incorporate Git, and now that's really becoming more of a standard. And I think Salesforce sees that, and they want that to be the standard that everyone uses moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Blanca, your opinions on DevOps Center. You're very familiar with the leading providers of DevOps solutions in the market. What's your opinion on Salesforce's offering with DevOps Center and how it's progressed? Obviously, they released Jira. They're looking at the issue tracking. They've released support this year for Azure DevOps as well. What's your take on how they're developing that platform and where they're going?
Yeah, I think that the team over at Salesforce is working diligently to stay committed in providing a tool that can help not only with deployments, but also ALM, right? How are they managing their work and having more visibility into where work is in the pipeline and in what stages is important. However, it is a newer tool. And like with any, if you buy a car that's a brand new model, my mom goes against getting the ones that are just released because they're not really polished yet, right? They're trying to figure out how efficient they are and what areas people like most to improve over the years. So normally we stay with the lines within the brands of cars that have been there longer. And not to say that that's a bad thing, but some teams need a tool. They need a system that will maybe be an easier lift for them, that won't cause for a lot of need for highly skilled individuals to manage. And in that case, DevOps centers is definitely an option. But I don't see that Salesforce is trying to compete with those like of Gearset and other entities. And let's just say the truth of the matter is we've seen a lot of shifts in who are leaders within these tooling offerings that we have and vendors. And I think that playing field is getting a little bit crowded this year, which is maybe a good thing because we're a little bit behind when it comes to DevOps for the SaaS world as it relates to Salesforce and how we need to work. And I'll
Yeah.
just say that, the introduction to Git is the biggest standing point, right? When we think about DevOps maturity, I like to use that image of raising kids and they crawl first, but in order for them to start walking or running or doing any kind of sports, they have to be able to stand their ground tall and be strong in that grounding. And I will say that it's good that a lot of people are using version control systems and getting into Git. I think that there's been the release with the new CLI and looking at Salesforce making an initiative to have a unified, command line interface for us to use that's not siloed by product, but yet it's helping bring more looking at developers and the actions that need to be taken across all of the product lines, which is another improvement for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the rising continued adoption of Git is something that I want to get onto in just a second. Jeb's mentioned it, and Blanca, you've just mentioned it here again now. Reed makes an interesting point in the chat as well, though, saying, don't underestimate the likelihood that job descriptions are just being copied over and over, often from completely different entities, again, by hiring managers and HR that are not familiar with the actual needs of the roles they're looking to fill. Is that something that rings true, either Blanca from you, from the job seeker side? I know, unfortunately, that you've spent a bit of time in the job market, or Jeb from yourself as somebody across that kind of more team lead position.
I'll go ahead and start on this one. I think there's an element of truth there, right? I would say myself, like I spend a lot of time in the beginning putting together, this is what we're looking at for our admins or our developers, spending time with HR, putting those together. As time goes on, maybe I put those together a year ago or 2 years ago. And, suddenly there's a situation where someone leaves or, we have an opening. And the first thing HR does is just goes back to that previous, what's the latest that we have here? Now you would hope that they would come out and, be like, oh, before we do this posting, we see this is old, this has come through. But, everyone's process is different and it's, obviously time is fleeting. So, they're going to do the best that they can. So I think there's definitely an element of truth there.
Yeah, I would agree. And yes, I have been looking at a lot of job descriptions as I have been on the search for the next career path there. And the one thing that I like to emphasize is that we need to go back and think of, who's managing Salesforce these days. It's not always within IT. In my many years of consulting, we've seen a large number of companies that have a business side department that has been the decision maker and have provided the financial support to invest in embracing a CRM like Salesforce and bringing that digital transformation that they need to the companies. However, there still lies that disconnect of, okay, well, how do I adequately staff the CRM team that needs to maintain this once we've implemented? They are sometimes, depending on where they sit and how close of a relationship they have with their IT department, sometimes DevOps is a total foreign curveball that is coming their way and they're trying to very rapidly adapt to how do they manage it. And so I think that that still is true. And we just need to have some more conversations and help enlighten and advocate for the right roles. I've seen a company who was under the impression that they had a release manager, and then it turned out they asked, us as a consulting firm, can you help us draft something? Because obviously we're not looking for the right thing. We thought we had this covered and we haven't. And it's a learning curve, right? Like embracing any new learning technology. Let's lean on those experts in the ecosystem, whether they're within our companies or externally, to make sure that we have the best path forward and how we're going to staff and implement and maintain so that we can remain secure and scalable.
Sure, for sure. So coming back around to the Git, the Git version control to some in the Salesforce ecosystem. One of the talks that I've done a couple of times at community conferences this year and at those Dreaming events has been learn Git for admins and teaching admins to Git. Both times I presented that, the session's been really well attended, which is obviously great for me to share that knowledge. And it really does seem that Git or version control is becoming a really integral part of people's processes moving forward, which is fantastic for us to see. Rob, just coming to you on this topic, what do you say about the rise of Git and version control through unified workflows and within Salesforce teams?
I think it does a few things. I mean, you could look at it through the technical lens and say, yes, everybody's committing their changes, whether it's code or low code, metadata, configuration, everything goes through that same process, which means that everybody's on the same page, everyone is working the same way. It definitely speaks to the collaborative approach that we always push for in DevOps. But I think there's a bit more to it than that as well. I think that by doing that, I think that you get this sort of increased accountability. I think people better understand what each team are doing. So it's very easy to be a full-on sort of hardliner developer and say I'm deep in the code. I don't care what your config stuff is. Equally, it's easy for an admin to, for example, add a new validation rule or a new required field, which suddenly trips up your developers' tests. So I think, by not just having the visibility of that, but having the conversations and actually working that way, Git is a way that enables that. We always talk about how the technology is like 20% of the problem, and actually talking to your fellow Salesforce professionals is the other 80%. But Git is the way that sort of does a lot of the technical enablement of that. And I think, it doesn't have to be that scary. And I think admins, through the work that we've both done on, Git for admins, it is a perennial favorite of mine as well. Suddenly people say, oh, I get this now. I understand the why. And I think that's the big part of DevOps, whether it's version control or backup or any of the other various sort of parts of that entire DevOps lifecycle. It's if you can get people to understand the why they need it or the why it's a good thing or what problem it's solving, things naturally tend to fall into place anyway.
Yeah. Jeb, do you have any comments around that, around the teams that you have worked in previously or currently with implementing a good DevOps solution, Gearset or otherwise? What's that learning curve been like for some of the members of your team?
Yeah, so I am a lot of experience in this. I come from the side of not being a developer first. I was an admin who kind of worked into the role, and I remember at my last position, that's when DevOps really became focused, where it's like, hey, let's stop using change sets. Let's see what's better. And to the point that Blanca was kind of bringing up, a lot of products are purchased from upper management making decisions, not necessarily what the IT or the technology team is looking at. And that's kind of how we were thrown into it first. They had purchased Capado. No one had any experience in Capado, and it kind of fell on me to be like, okay, well, let's learn this. And through that, started learning about Git, and it's the same thing Rob's saying. Showing the admins the value of it and where this is kind of coming in. I have a person on my team right now who is honestly one of the most skilled admins I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and been working in the industry for 10 years. And coming onto my team was the first time they had experience with using Git, and they were just very interested in it. I mean, there's so much to learn. I think once people get a hold of it, once people have a tool like Gearset, whether it's Gearset or Capado or DevOps Center or Click Deploy, whatever well, Click Deploy is not around anymore, but whatever that tool is, once you start seeing and getting, you're like, oh, okay, this is what the metadata looks like behind the scenes. This is what it's actually doing. You start going down that rabbit hole and you really start seeing the value there. I mean, being able to enhance your code review process, being able to enhance your DevOps process. One of the biggest things that we had is before we had any sort of tool, we had a Google Sheet and you listed all the metadata items that you wanted to deploy. And then comes along the release manager and they would spend hours putting together even with some of like the browser tools that you have for change sets, but they would spend hours putting together that release. And now, that we're using Gearset and we have tools like that, you can have the confidence that, hey, here's, almost like that object-oriented programming approach, right? You have this compiled group of what this change is. We have confidence that when it's going into the next org, it's going to be what we want it to be. And we have confidence that as we combine it with other changes that people have made, that if there is a problem, we're going to be notified about it. And if not, it can move up. So it saves you a lot of time. It is a big step for admins to learn about that. But if you have a good mix of admins and developers, I find that the developers like teaching the admins about it. They also like being involved with it, and the admins like learning about it. It's really one of the more, I would say, of all the products that I've put in place, it's been one of the more fun areas that I've been involved with.
Yeah. Blanca, is that
I
mirrored
really,
in your... Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say I agree 1,000%. So when I first started off in consulting nearly 5 years ago, I was introduced to a tool that brought us all together, whether you were QA, whether you were on the config side, whether you were on the code side, whether you were the technical architect, it didn't matter. Everyone on the team was unified and collaborating through that tool. And that just blew my mind. And one of the reasons why I really gravitated towards this space. And I think that being one of the 3 amazing leaders who runs Rad Women, a nonprofit program that teaches people who are women or identify as non-binary around the globe, if they have 2 years plus of admin experience, we will allow them to apply to our courses to learn Apex so that they can transition into junior developer, or architect roles, or sometimes they want to stay in the admin roles. And I know there was a controversial post on social media. I don't know if it was this year or not, but it was fairly recently, and it was something around the lines of admins don't want to learn Git. They don't want to learn about version control. And I could say that was so untrue and got shot down right away by a bunch of people globally. And the truth of the matter is that our teams are faced with a lot of challenges. We have to keep up with the pace of innovation that we're expected to deliver. We're expected to deliver at very high quality and a fast pace. So the more and more you layer on the challenges, it's like a big onion that starts festering. And if you don't have the proper understanding of how to do things and incorporated everything from what well architected from the Salesforce team has and a framework for us to think of and how we work, how we communicate, how we build trust and work more efficiently as a team together, reaching a unified goal. And that is smoother deployments, because smoother deployments leads to us shipping innovation more often and satisfied customers on the other end. And with those challenges, everyone needs to be hands on deck. And I've seen a lot of folks, not just even from the admin area, there's people from QA that are like, I need to get an understanding of this. Do you have some resources? So it really is something that even very strong lead BAs want to understand, project managers want to understand. And as our, teams get smaller and smaller, especially with this economic climate in technology, we need to get more scrappy. We need to have more table-shaped, team members that bring different skill sets, but highly specialize in those areas and that can contribute and we work better together.
Yeah, DevOps as a shared responsibility is one of those topics that has been on the rise. And I do feel, like you say, Blanca, that is one of the areas that is becoming more and more important. Even if you look down towards like the business analysis part of any project or business as usual things, the question is, how do we deliver this thing? Or do we have a system in place that will allow us to robustly handle that? And Rob, I don't know if you have any kind of opinions on that, on the democratization of DevOps and DevOps, the whole DevOps lifecycle even becoming more important and more considered by more members of Salesforce or IT team.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I always look forward to the moments in these chats when you say, Rob, do you have any opinions? Because I always do. But seriously, yeah, absolutely. I know. And when you mentioned business analysts there, my heart warmed because I've been a big champion of getting business analysts, way back at the the start of any development pipeline when you're gathering the requirements, to understand DevOps concepts. Not the technical, not the how we deliver, how we monitor, how we manage, but understanding as a principle, breaking things into small incremental chunks, because that lends itself so well to small incremental improvements that we deploy through Git, feature branch, all that kind of modularity that we get from the technical side of DevOps. It begins with how we design the requirements and how we set those user expectations around, okay, we're going to do this, and we'll have this rapid feedback cycle. We'll do it in little pieces so you can make sure that we're steering it in the direction that actually works for you as the business, rather than the old school traditional waterfall model. I don't want to get into the politics of agile. Some people are for, some people are less keen these days, but the idea that actually, as we're going along, we're going to keep you in the loop so that whether we're actually listening to what you've asked for, and we've understood what you've asked for, and we're implementing it in the right way. So I think, yeah, the democratization of DevOps isn't just a technical facet. I think, as Blanca said there, the QAs want in on the action, because some of the technical aspects is automating their testing, right, reducing their workload. As DevOps practitioners, automation's always been key to a lot of the things that we're able to achieve. But I think also, it's like at both ends of that whole delivery, and users included, understanding how we deliver helps us deliver better.
Yeah,
And
for
I'll
sure.
just add, understanding that DevOps doesn't start right before deployment. DevOps, right? We already stated only 20% is a tool. DevOps is a way of working. It's a culture. It's a whole mindset. And it is truly about collaboration, increased transparency, and efficiency.
Yeah, and to the point of what Rob was saying, like an incremental approach, and you kind of touched on one of the things that I feel like I talk more and more about every day, which is like different development philosophies between like waterfall and and agile and Scrum and all this. But definitely looking at it, I mean, this is what we did. Where's the value, and what do I think people can learn in the beginning? Like, what are they going to tag onto, and how are we going to grow from there? I mean, if you look at our development process, or our DevOps process, when we first started using Gearset versus now, it's completely different. It was really, more like, hey, let's just do straight org to org deployments, but get a general pipeline kind of going. It wasn't the actual pipeline tool. Get people used to that. Okay, once they're used to that and they're used to using feature branches, even though, version control hasn't been really applied yet, and we don't have kind of like those security gates to stop, different issues that come up. We were just kind of like overriding things. Once people got kind of used to that, it's like, okay, take the next step and kind of move from there. And I think that's really the way to get adoption. Also, I think Git is a huge kind of way for your Salesforce team to work with your non-Salesforce team. I find more and more we have integrations with other groups, software teams inside the companies that are not working in Salesforce. But Git seems to be if your Salesforce team knows Git, the software team's going to know Git. There's going to be a commonality there that really brings people together. So it's interesting how Git has really evolved the ecosystem.
Yeah,
Deb,
that
I just want
mindset.
to
Yeah, go on,
I
Blanca.
was
Sorry.
just going to emphasize a little bit that importance. We keep bringing up the importance of like leaning on your IT teams if you're buying from the business side, and team members trying to understand what are the resources, right? Do we have a center of excellence that we can tap into? And even if Salesforce is new, I mean, I've spent extensive time getting training over the years, multiple certifications with global entities that certify DevOps, and this is not always just a challenge. We have multiple different Salesforce clouds that businesses want to implement. There's one hiccup, right? But then you have cross clouds, you have GCP come in and play, AWS a bunch. You're adding AI layer into that. We have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence from the very beginning before we're even making any purchasing decisions. Asking questions like, what do we need to be aware of when it comes to security, and managing that for our software development teams, as well as testing and everything else, skill sets and expertise in there. And I think that's, I know there's a comment from Kenny in there, how do we get this all the way up to the top? I think that's still a huge gap. I think that it's been a gap for a few years within our ecosystem. I think with all of the learning tools, including Trailhead and the free offerings that, Gearset has and other vendors have, we know we're not meeting that bar, right? And where is the level of knowledge? Where does it need to be? We're still going to be working to get there, but it is going to take some time. And the more of us that can amplify and get the word out together, the better. We want to equip everybody on teams. It doesn't matter what hat you're wearing. We want you to have a good understanding of why this is so important.
Yeah, and kind of alluding to aspects of the DevOps lifecycle that are being extended, and part of to Kenny's point once again, how do we get that message to the top? I think one of the key things that's happened in the Salesforce ecosystem this year, there's been two big DevOps-based acquisitions this year. The first is Gearset's acquisition of Clayton, which is huge, not just for us at Gearset, but for the ecosystem in shedding some light on the importance of that DevOps lifecycle and having, to your point, Blanca, robust security measures and practices in place that help with that. Rob, tell us a little bit about the acquisition and why that's exciting, not just for Gearset, but for the wider Salesforce ecosystem when it comes to code scanning and security best practices.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, it's very easy to, when you're first starting sort of adopting DevOps or what, you believe DevOps may be, as focusing so hard on the deployment step. Okay. It's delivering your code from A to B, and just getting things out the door. Now, a bigger part of that, arguably, is delivering not just from A to B, but delivering from A to B with quality. Okay, quality is so important in DevOps. You can do as many releases as you like, but if they don't work first time, it's still going to take just as long to get things out the door. And I think what tools such as Clayton do in so many ways is emphasize and drive and support that drive for quality releases. Now, it is a code scanning tool in this particular instance, so we are focused on that code level thing, but it allows you to bring best practice. It allows you to look for common issues, and they could be functional issues, or they could be security issues. There's a number of ways that you can, number of lenses that you can look at that through. The nice thing about it is that a lot of the common issues that it's able to identify, it'll actually fix for you as well, and it won't do that blindly. You certainly have that human element. The AI is not taking over the world and just changing all your code for you, but it's guiding you, it's elevating, it's educating, and getting those standards in there, so that if you look at some of the DORA metrics, the DevOps research group that kind of defines what are good things to measure in DORA. It's not just the speed of your deployments or how quickly or how often you deploy, but like what is your change failure rate? For all those deployments you're doing, how many are actually nailing it first time? How many of them are like getting that quality? And when we talk about failure, it's not just failure to deploy. It could be, yeah, it deployed, but the business is saying, well, I found this bug, I found that bug, I found the other bug. So quality, that's what Clayton definitely brings to the table, and it makes it easier to find those issues and find them earlier before they become big problems.
Yeah, Jeb, what are you seeing in your team in terms of the importance of secure releases, safe releases, and driving growth through quality Salesforce applications?
Yeah, I think to Rob's point, the DORA metrics, if you're not familiar with that, if you're very new to it, I think the DORA metrics are an easy way to really see some of the key metrics that you can measure, and you can find ways to measure those. Maybe they're not perfect right off the bat, but you can really see in your DevOps process, you're like, are we tracking these kinds of things? And what do we need to do to track these? I remember the first time I was kind of introduced to them. I believe it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. There was a big push from Gearset on them, and I started looking and started thinking about, okay, there were 2 or 3 things in there where I was like, we're not really measuring it that way. We were mostly measuring, how long does it take us from beginning to end? We have a ticket, and how long does it take us to deploy it? We're not really thinking of, hey, how long does it actually take someone from the time they begin working it? How many times do we have change failures? I mean, we were tracking bugs, but were we really tracking that rate properly? And tools like Clayton, I think, are very important. that they continue to drive that, make it easier on you. I also think with the emergence of a lot of technologies that we start seeing even on the development side, Salesforce has the Einstein flow builder, for instance, for AI to, to kind of help you build flows, right? And then you see a lot of that in code as well. I've talked to many developers that are talking about, they use ChatGPT to give themselves kind of that first step to begin building. And where does that really start impacting? And how would doing something like that maybe not get caught in static code analysis, right? And like, where do we need to have a little bit more advanced tools to start seeing not only identifying that AI is being used, but AI is being used responsibly in your development processes. And again, I think that's why there's a big, why Clayton is really kind of a big push in that direction. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, Blanca, I saw you come off mute there as well. Was there a comment that you had too?
Shift left, move this all early. Don't wait till the end. I can't say how many times I've seen teams struggling and they're like right before UAT or right before go live, and it really is concerning, and it's sad. I wouldn't, like to be on a team that's experiencing that, and I have been in the past, and this is why I like to invest so much time here. I think we need to, keep having these conversations, and even outside of our teams that are doing DevOps, that have hands-on in some element of their DevOps process, because a lot of what I'm seeing from managing operations and IT for so many years is that you have to be able to talk to the business people and the executives that need to hear and figure out how to support, whether it's financially, whether it's acquiring more talent, whether it's in professional development. But we need to start talking their language. We need to start understanding what are the value streams, how do they relate to the KPIs that businesses are trying to move within the value streams, trying to identify where are these pain points, where are the bottlenecks, and really articulate in a way that they understand and they live and breathe every second of the day, right? So that they can come back and want to support and want to fund and want to grow our maturity levels as SaaS development teams.
And I
Yeah,
love what you said there, Blanca, about, the value stream aspect, because, that comes back to the question that Kenny asked about how do we deliver that to the top? It's demonstrate the value. Okay. It's always about the bottom line of every business. And I think if you can get those efficiencies, the less time you spend trying to get your code shipped, the more code you can write, the more features you can add, the more market differentiators you can add, the more operational efficiencies on your internal business you can add. So that's the value, and that's the the proposition that you give to the top level, the business, to say, like, this is why DevOps is important. Forget all the technical. They don't care about Git. They don't care about pipelines and flows and back propagation and all the other great things that we can do with tools like Gearset. They care about, yeah, but what does it do for my business? What does it enable for us? So hopefully, Kenny, that's between the four of us, that's kind of covered off that question for you.
And
Yeah.
talk about security, right? No company wants to end up on
Oh,
a
yeah.
headline that has gone south. And the way that you do that is ensuring that you're thinking about it in every step of everything that you do with building out the systems, because in the end, it translates to a happy user, a happy customer somewhere, and avoiding a big catastrophe.
The other big acquisition, before I fully open the AI can of worms that Jeb has Jeb has started to talk about, because we will open that can of worms. It feels it wouldn't feel right to not open that up fully. But many will be familiar with the big acquisition that Salesforce made this year of Own, previously known as Own Backup. That was a really interesting thing for me. I think it highlighted the importance of having a robust data backup and protection solution in place so that Salesforce teams can move with agility and with confidence. If you have a great backup solution, then it's likely that you're going to be able to do that with more confidence. There's some theories flying around on LinkedIn and what have you that acquisition might be a bigger play towards agent clouds and what Salesforce are doing with data center. But Jeb, do you have any opinion on that acquisition and what that kind of means for Salesforce teams?
Yeah, so I always look at these acquisitions very to see like how bought in is Salesforce to actually getting this acquisition. Because I've seen it over the years. You know, you have Marketing Cloud, which was Exact Target, Pardot, Tableau, Steelbrick Velocity. There's been like numerous different products that Salesforce has bought over the years, and it really depends on, you know, what does that integration end up looking like, and how much are they committing to making that product a success? Own has been around for not as long as maybe some people think they have been, but I know that it's a very robust solution. I mean, I've used them at multiple different places. I think that they got a very uh, well-developed product. And I would expect them to utilize some of the well-developed pieces there, but it also makes you kind of think when they purchase a product like this, how much was Salesforce planning on kind of doing on their own side, but now they have this whole group that has like kind of this mentality and this thought process on how they want to implement this and how they want this to go forward. And how does that change the trajectory of, you know, what Salesforce does? I mean, especially with you can kind of I've seen in numerous places, usually you have multiple backup solutions based upon how readily you need the data available. I've seen a lot of, you know, straight SQL backup systems using tools like DBAMP and stuff like that, which DBAMP, that's a very interesting story as well. But you know, what I'm really curious to see is if the acquisition of Own Backup is related to what's going on in the DevOps Center, and if that starts kind of coming together. I don't know that for sure, but you know, it just kind of seems like a very similar kind of area. Even though they're two separate areas, they relate in a lot of ways. So I'm curious to see how they go, and I'm curious to see how invested Salesforce really is into integrating it into its product.
Blanca?
No, I would agree, and I hope that it's something that they are going to stay invested in, because having managed operations in so many different flavors of technologies, not having sufficient recovery practices and policies in place is definitely a red zone nobody wants to be in. And there are a lot of things that are moving very quickly, right? We saw when Data Cloud was launched, we didn't have Data Cloud in sandboxes. So while we're not supposed to make changes in production, there was a lot of encouragement around that, and also could wreak possible chaos and havoc, right? For posing challenges for teams that are like, wait, we want to do what? That's a little bit too new for yours. It's risky. When there's risk, you need to make sure that you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, to Jeb's point, with multiple vendors, and really have everyone on deck with understanding what that needs to look like. And that's a tough challenge. So I do hope that they stay continued investment in this area. And I did see there's a Q&A that came up, and it's a question about Salesforce offering chain sets and DevOps Center for deployment, and they want to know about Gearset and if it's suitable for small teams. Having been a consultant, having seen many teams of many sizes, running a nonprofit that is a smaller team, yes, having a tool like Gearset will definitely help. I think that there's a lot more flexibility and more robust functionality with tools like Gearset above that's available with DevOps Center for sure. You want to make sure that even though you're a small team, you might grow, you might have more work. At some point, you need to be able to scale. And what I've seen is sometimes teams pigeon themselves in a corner because they invest in a tool because they're trying to be extremely frugal. And sometimes being too frugal, it's a shot in the toe and will keep you in a big pothole and a hurdle to make the race that you need with bringing innovation to your constituencies. So that's my take on that one. And yes, I do hope that everyone is embracing, everything from using Clayton with, thinking through the code scans earlier and security earlier, thinking about your backups. Let's not omit any part of or facet within the DevOps lifecycle, because they are all equally important.
I agree. Rob?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think, sort of to tie those two threads together around, sort of Salesforce's acquisition of Own, and they've, recently announced that, some of their command line tooling and their code analyzer stuff, and they're doing, starting to move into sort of, the DevOps and deployment thing for Data Cloud. I've seen announcements for, so definitely they're not taking their foot off the gas with all things DevOps. So it shows, the importance not just for Salesforce, but for the Salesforce DevOps space. How important all of these things are, and to make sure that you are kind of covering each of those angles. The other nice thing about it, of course, is as Salesforce continues to either internally develop or acquire things that make up that DevOps lifecycle, it keeps us on our toes. It allows us to have that opportunity to innovate. We do have a head start on DevOps Center because we've been around a little while longer. We're in backup. Own backup is obviously in backup. So all of this kind of competition, no matter where it's coming from, actually elevates the playing field for everybody. And the winners in this are the people, the people that are doing the job, the people that are needing these tools, that are needing to implement DevOps and get best practice and process within their organization. Everybody wins because everybody is leveling up, and Salesforce is definitely behind this need for robust DevOps and across that whole life cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good message, I think, that underpins DevOps in its entirety. It's about everybody winning. And I think that 2024 has really helped us stride further towards that. I'm gonna move on to the final thing. I don't know if 10 minutes is enough to cover this, but we're gonna go for it anyway. Rob, you alluded to some improvements that Salesforce has made in terms of the developer lifecycle and application lifecycle when it comes to Data Cloud. Salesforce this year alone have released Data Cloud properly, and people are starting to use it in earnest. They brought out data packs to test properly with any Data Cloud implementation that you're doing. And they've also announced AgentForce Testing Center. I'm just going to say AgentForce and let one of y'all take it away. Jeb, I'm going to ask you first.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, AgentForce is very interesting. In 2023, going to Dreamforce, there was a big push on Einstein AI and the Data Cloud. The Data Cloud, I think, really took the show. And looking into this last, unfortunately, I wasn't at Dreamforce this year, but looking into a lot of the things coming out of it, AgentForce was obviously like the big crux of it. And if you look at a lot of the news around it, Salesforce is really pushing it hard. They're hiring a lot of salespeople to continue to go through. I can tell you from personal experience, I've seen a lot of I don't want to say like overly aggressive, but there's been some aggressive pricing on trying to get people to adopt it. I know that there's a large investment in it. And so as we start looking at these, it kind of makes me think about, or it makes me take a step back on, what's the reason that we originally bought Salesforce, right? And I think this kind of brings us back to the original, or like back farther in the conversation, where we're talking about hey, people brought, or your executives buy tools, right? So where do you think the accidental admin comes from, right? Because we bought a tool, we didn't have the people necessarily experienced to work on that tool, and then the accidental admin comes along and they start doing it, and then things start evolving there. So when you start looking at even going back to products like Own Backup, and we're talking about DBAMP, it's like, hey, if you have a certain level of experience, maybe you don't need these kinds of products, but if you want to click and plug and play product, which I think Salesforce is really like, a cornerstone of, right? Then you start looking into some of the stuff like AgentForce. And then when you start looking at the pricing on AgentForce, you start thinking about, from the bottom line perspective, like how much does it cost to do a conversation? And how much is AgentForce going to save you? How many conversations is AgentForce going to be able to resolve? And then as you get further into that, then you start looking into the investment. And like you had mentioned, like AgentForce Testing Center, Data Cloud sandboxes, which, is the big piece coming out of there, which, Blanca's talking about. They're talking about AI generated tests, right? So like AI kind of training your own AI, right? Because you have the AgentForce prompt builders. And so now you have kind of this testing idea that like, hey, we're going to have a solution that's able to give you kind of the equivalent of like, kind of regression tests on your backend code, but training like the more AgentForce model. And Salesforce obviously doing the free AI specialist cert, trying to get the rest of us in there as well. I think it's a big push. I would expect to see more. I know there's a lot of questions about, kind of the pricing. How's that go? How does that move forward, right? Because it is more of kind of a usage-based model versus some of the other things we see in Salesforce, which is just kind of like, hey, you get a license and it comes with all these things, whether or not you use them. And we're starting to get a little bit more specific coming down. It takes a little bit more investment, not just from our side as people working in the technology, but also from the upper management side to think like, okay, what is the value here? And then us being able to kind of drive that, not just like what's the value on what AgentForce is going to save, but what's the value on our side on how much time we're going to be able to save and how efficiently can we work with this new tool. So it's very curious to me. I mean, I'm still kind of in my, I would say I'm still in my infancy of kind of diving into it because we haven't totally implemented anything like that yet. I mean, we've done some kind of chat things in the past using ChatGPT, but I'm very curious into, how does that compare to AgentForce and where does it go? And it's mind-boggling really to me to think about, where we could go with this. But like anything else, it's nothing stays the same. Everything changes. The only constant is change. So it's just that next step.
For sure. It's 2.0 now as well, I think. So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we're getting there. Blanca.
I think they're trying to keep up with all the LLM versioning and how much innovation they need to bring to support this. There definitely is a lot of excitement. There definitely is a huge level of tenacity to learn and skill up and figure out how can this solve a lot of business world problems, right? I do think that you'll have some players that are a little bit more skeptical. They're a little bit, for good means. They're asking right questions. They're trying to figure out more, not just cost wise, but I'll go back to the security wise. There's when there's a lot of unknowns, I like to think of it. I shared when we were prepping for this call that my eldest is officially a driver now. So with great freedom and the responsibility to, the like ability to do something like drive, I mean, you still have to think about everything. And there's a lot of roads, a lot of highways, a lot of signs, a lot of people in the world that have been trained in this area. And I think that AI is a flood of us trying to figure out how do we understand this better? How do we make sure that it stays secure and that it's going to be, of quality that it's delivering and how we interact with and definitely keep that human touch and that human governance, right? Because I don't know, I've been in computers all my life. I don't know that I trust computers to like try to figure out how to maintain my household for me. Nor would I want it to drive my son, who's a first time driver, around on its own. It's a learning curve for sure. I think yes, we have to learn how to embrace and adopt, but I say do it with caution, choose to challenge, bring up questions, learn more, and learn more so that you can bring best practices, share those conflict points, and let's learn and grow together with this new roller coaster that we have here.
Rob, you're off mute too. So any final thoughts on AgentForce or
Yeah,
how
I
this
mean,
might change DevOps?
yeah, there's a brief thought I had when when Jeb was talking about how on the one hand you've got the automated testing using AI, and on the other hand you've got AI writing the code that it's actually testing, and is it going to end up with just a case of like marking your own homework here? And I think that kind of leads to the bigger point that I wanted to make, which was as we increasingly adopt AI to do all these tasks, the development tasks, whether it's flow, whether it's code, the building of things. I think that the DevOps surface area isn't going to change. It's still going to need to solve the same challenges. How do we cope with the velocity? And with AI, the velocity is going to increase. How do we cope with the quality? And again, opinions vary on the quality of AI generated content, whether it's code, creative writing, artwork, or whatever. The creation phase always needs that human second pair of eyes. And I think, the DevOps tooling is potentially at that intersection where it's not quite AI, it's still sort of more automation, but it's actually doing that quality gate checking. If we go back to what we were saying about Clayton and the code analysis stuff, for example, no longer are we going to be checking the code of our peers, or a junior developer that we're bringing up through the team, and whatever the human generated code looks like. The challenges and issues that may be put before us from AI generated implementation are going to be subtly different enough that actually the tooling that we need to verify and check that type of content is also going to need to subtly change. So I think, there's going to be this kind of parallel movement of DevOps tooling growing to the point where actually it's capable of handling AI, both in terms of volume and in terms of quality. And I think, as we are kind of wrapping up 2024, and now starting to look ahead to 2025 onwards, I think that's definitely something I expect to see with the market moving forward with all the AI agents.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the three of you for your insights across this panel. There is just one subtle question that is left based on this conversation, and Jeb, it's to do with your background. Have we answered the question whether Rob Cowell is a myth or a legend?
Yeah, I'm glad someone was paying attention, but Rob is both of those things. He is the myth, he is the legend. If you've never been to ShirtForce, or was it shirtforce.org, I think. It's one of my more favorite websites to go for Salesforce related paraphernalia, I guess you could say. But it's I remember running into Rob on the street actually in San Francisco, and you can't miss him. He is the legend. So it's always been good working with him.
There you go. There you have it. The answer is both. Panelists, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really excited for what 2025 is going to hold for all of us. What I will say to the folks that are still here with us, thank you so much for sticking around. But go and follow these wonderful people on LinkedIn and where they hang out. Jeb, are you still in the Salesforce Discord exchange a bit? Do you still hang out in there?
I am. I can, well, actually, I don't know if I am in your Discord. I know I was on the Slack for a while, but I can definitely hop back in there and answer any questions you guys have.
Perfect. But you will see plenty of Blanca on LinkedIn. Be sure to follow Blanca, and if you have any questions, Blanca will be happy to help. And Blanca, are you still in the job market in case anybody's after your expertise?
I am, and DevOps space is definitely at the top of my list and where I've been spending a lot of time because this is a challenge that not everybody likes to gravitate to. But I'll just add, I'm on Twitter too. So, if you need some mentorship in this area, don't hesitate in reaching out. I really, really have it brings me joy to help somebody out. And if someone can avoid some of the hurdles that I've seen for myself and for other teams, we are the Trailblazer community, and we want to make sure that everybody is moving forward successfully.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, be sure to reach out to Blanca, Jeb, Rob for any questions that you have. Happy holidays to everybody. Enjoy the final week before hopefully what is a very enjoyable festive break. And we will see you all again on a webinar sometime soon in early 2025. Thank you, folks, and see you again sometime soon.
Take care, everyone.
Yes, thank you all.
Bye.